Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now what we have here is something a little bit different. We've looked at a handful of Minisforum's latest innovations before, from mini PCs with external GPU docks to small form factor Radeon powered computers. This time around we have a Windows tablet, or the first AMD Ryzen powered 3-in-1 Windows tablet. It's called the V3. It arrived with a few accessories including a stand, keyboard and V pen. The welcome note and stickers didn't go unnoticed either and were very much appreciated. The tablet itself features a 14-inch 165Hz 2560 by 1600 display, which looks fantastic. We'll expand on that later, but other specs of the V3 include an 8-core 16-thread Ryzen 7 8840U, 32 gigs of 6400MHz LPDDR5 and a 1TB M.2 SSD. When it comes to any device I test, my first thought is always gaming. This has Radeon 780M graphics, which have been tried and tested before on this channel, but how well will they work as part of a more compact configuration? Will heat and power be a concern? Furthermore, will gaming at the display's native resolution prove problematic? First things first, let's take a look around. We get a 65W power adapter which will charge the device using either of the two full function USB-C ports on the right hand side. We also have the power button and the power light here. On the other side we have a V-Link port to potentially transform this into a second display, as well as an SD card slot, volume control and a headphone jack. There are 4 speakers around the outside of the V3 with intake vents at the back and exhaust vents at the top. I like the fact the keyboard and rear stand are magnetic, neither of which interfere with the airflow when the tablet is on a desk. This is especially important during any CPU or GPU intensive scenarios where heat dissipation matters most. Speaking of which, let's get into performance. As I said at the start, the specs inside this thing power a bright, vibrant, anti-glare 14-inch 2560 by 1600 IPS screen, which is responsive and accurate whether you're using a finger or the pen. Before running any benchmarks, I opened up Minisforum Space, a pre-installed program where we can monitor hardware utilization and choose different power modes. We have Balanced, Power Saver and Premium, which is only usable with the power cable plugged in. All 3 modes tune the brightness and refresh rate. The Premium mode is of course best for intensive tasks and gaming, as it will switch the display to 165Hz, which we can also do manually from the Windows settings of course, and it'll increase the TDP to 28 watts. I ran Cinebench R23 first of all for a single core result of 1735 and a multi result of 13196. For reference, this makes it more capable than my desktop processor of choice, the 6-core 12-thread i5 12400F. Not bad considering the power consumption. But now, the moment you've been waiting for. Can the 28W 8-core 16-thread Ryzen 8840U and 780M graphics handle games, and can they do so at a high resolution? Well, first of all, we have Fallout 4 2560 by 1600 with the low preset and TAA here for between 40 and 60 FPS most of the time. This benchmark was taken in Diamond City, a more demanding part of the game. Temperature wise, we're looking at between 60 and 70 degrees most of the time, pretty good considering the 9.8mm thick enclosure. Next up, it's the legendary GTA 4, once again running at the V3's native 2560 by 1600 resolution. This is an older game, but it does give some hardware trouble, so I thought it was definitely worth testing, and it's very much worth a play in 2024 if you haven't done so before, but I'm sure most of you have. We saw over 70 FPS here with the medium settings, with the detail slider numbers set to 20. This certainly helps with performance. Now this game does have a few issues, as is well documented by now, especially running in the standard DirectX mode, but it seemed pretty smooth here, and the result was actually quite surprising overall. Next up, it's GTA 4's successor GTA 5, with the high textures and everything else set to normal. FXAA was also turned on to smooth out some of those jagged edges, which are less obvious at this higher screen res of course. It's another decent result for this Ryzen and Radeon powered tablet, with the power consumption maxing out at 28 watts and the temperatures remaining very stable. I must say that Counter-Strike 2 is very awkward without a mouse. I should have purchased a USB-C compatible one before testing out some games, but I gave it a good go anyway. We can still get a decent idea of performance, of course, despite my dreadful gameplay, and with the default low preset, albeit with FSR disabled, the game averaged 91 FPS. It is of course worth remembering that if we turn the resolution down, these figures would certainly increase across the board. Apex Legends was also a bit awkward, but we powered through nonetheless for an average of 60 frames per second with nothing but integrated graphics. The fast 6400 MHz RAM also helps a lot, I'm sure. I've got the texture streaming budget set to medium, everything else at its lowest, and TSAA enabled. Once again, it's important to reiterate that we're playing at the native resolution here just to take full advantage of the excellent screen. Speaking of which, there will be some instances where we do need to make sacrifices, either by dropping this resolution or by enabling upscaling, the latter of which I did with Forza Horizon 5. The medium preset with FSR 2.2 set to balanced returned 60 FPS in this multi-competitor race. The percentile lows were also very good here. This frame rate will increase outside of multi-competitor races like this when you're just driving around, exploring the countryside, things like that. Then you will see higher numbers overall. Cyberpunk 2077 also benefited from FSR, and once again I used the balanced preset. The 28W 8840U delivered 40 FPS with pretty solid percentile lows. I took a drive through a busier part of Night City, and just like in Forza Horizon 5 tested just now, and pretty much every other game, of course, the less going on screen, the higher the frame rate is going to be. And here, when we're driving around and exploring the Badlands, for example, we will see a higher average FPS, as well as some improvements to the percentile figures. Now, of course, the 780M iGPU also supports ray tracing, and while it's definitely best left disabled, we can just about squeeze 30 FPS from it with the Ultra Performance FSR mode. Now, using Ultra Performance mode at 1080p looks a bit messy, but because we're upscaling to a higher resolution, it still looks somewhat decent here. It's probably not often, if ever, you've seen ray tracing on a Windows tablet. Fortnite up next, 2560 by 1600 with the low preset and FXAA with 100% 3D res scaling. This gave us 80 FPS on average, though of course there were some percentile issues. Part of the reason I wanted to stick to this resolution where possible was because we tested the 780M at 1080p and lower before. Also, the lower TDP of the CPU had me thinking that 1600p gaming would be far more out of reach, but to be honest, most of the time it was more than acceptable when using this hardware. Now finally, it's Red Dead Redemption 2, which really does look amazing on this display. With the ultra textures, TAA medium and everything else set to low along with FSR enabled, we did get over 30 FPS, but every time I run this game on Windows 11, no matter the device, I get these little jumps and stutters that you can probably pick up on the frame time graph. It doesn't really matter what hardware I use. I always tend to notice them. It's a little off-putting, but I won't let it spoil what is a pretty impressive set of results from a tablet. Now you might be wondering what it sounds like under this stress, and to be honest, the fans, even under load, aren't that loud. It seems far quieter than a lot of gaming laptops I've tested, that's for sure, and it's even less audible when the game volume is turned up. Now overall, the Minisforum V3 has been really fun to test. It packs more gaming power than some of the entry-level PCs we've put together over the years on this channel, and if I'm honest, I'll probably be using it as an editing companion to my desktop from now on. Of course, at over £1,000, it's not cheap, and I can't sit here and try and convince you otherwise, but when you compare it to other similar spec machines, it is competitive in that context. But let me know what you think. Of course, we're mostly about gaming here on this channel, and that's what I have fun doing, so that tends to be my go-to with any hardware that I test. Thanks to all of you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you all again very soon.